I'll talk a little bit about my experience as a singer and singing Ananda music. Before I came to Ananda, I sang in many different kinds of groups, madrigal groups, barbershop quartet, choir, small group, rock and roll band, folk duo, etc. I took classical voice lessons for 4 years and sang classical music in the in the school performances, and musicals, everything pretty much. I loved it. Old-timey music, bluegrass, traditional music from other countries, and they all have their own their own special flavor, and they're fun to sing, and I love singing harmonies and singing in a small group where your voices just kind of blend into one, and enjoyed very much my time when I actually was my work was being in a rock and roll band. And but you get tired of singing those songs, and when I first was exposed to Swamiji's music, it was in 1979 in Santa Barbara, and I had just driven across country from Vermont and landed in Encinitas and was camping in Encinitas in a Volkswagen bus and with my former partner. And we started going to the temple. Turns out we were camping right next to the gardens down there in Encinitas, and started reading the autobiography of a yogi. And then we found out that there was a disciple coming to Santa Barbara, and he had a community of householders, and my partner had children, so we were a family, and we did not see ourselves living in Encinitas and going to the temple just once a week. We wanted to, dive in. And so we made the trek up there to Santa Barbara and signed up for Swamiji's weekend workshop. On Friday night, there was a opening, introductory lecture and some music by the Ghandharvas. The Ghandharvas are what is now the Ananda Joy Singers, or the Joy Singers, or the Ananda Singers. The Ghandharvas was the original name, and that means celestial singers, celestial musicians. And back then, the singers had long skirts and flowery tops, or a flowery top and a peasant dress. I mean, it was very, 60s, kind of, 70s. And I loved the music, and I immediately bought the tape, the cassette tape, the one tape that there was, and also the path, and that was my journey, real journey, had begun. And Friday night after the introduction, I was out in the hallway perusing the books, kind of, hoping to meet Swami Kriyananda, but I was looking at some sheet music for a piano sonata, the Divine Romance, that Swamiji had written, and all of a sudden I felt a presence behind me, and he said, "Do you play?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Would you like to hear it?" I said, "Yes." And so by this time, actually, we were the only people there. Pretty much everyone had left. He took us back into the auditorium, and he played all 3 movements of the sonata for us, inviting the Ghandharvas to come up and sing in the 3rd movement, Lord, I long to see thee. At that time, that was the only choral part of the song. Now there's an exquisite first movement has words and music and 3-part harmony. So that was a very special blessing to have that private concert with Swamiji, and then the next day we did the whole weekend workshop, and on the Sunday we all wound up out at Norman's place at Sunburst, and with Swamiji and Norman Paulson and Reverend Bernard giving the Sunday service. So I was hooked, and I knew I could never go back to my rock and roll band, that the Ananda music I just knew that it was going to play a big part in my life. And in fact, I believe it was the year that Swamiji left, I wrote him a letter in January at the kind of anniversary around January 20th, of when I first met him, and I thanked him and reminded him of it. And he wrote back and he said, I remember this. He said, that was a fitting beginning to your life of service through the music. So I felt I had his blessing, and a few months later, he was gone. After first meeting Swamiji for that weekend retreat in Santa Barbara, and coming away from it with the cassette tape and the path, my partner and I were traveling still, and we were going back up the coast of California and then across the country back to Vermont for the summer. And we stopped at Ananda Village on the way, of course, and I couldn't wait to get back there. But it would be another year before we made it back there. Luckily, during that year, we had the cassette tape and we wore it out. And I can remember one time, I mean, we learned all the songs, and I can remember one time, and my partner was driving, and we were singing along, and all of a sudden he pulled over to the side of the road, and he just started weeping. And the music had touched him so deeply. And this is the power of this music. It has both the musical component and the inspired poetry and words. And the musicality of it is wonderful too. So I decided that, a few months later, I applied to come to do the apprenticeship program, which is now the Karma Yoga program. And there were boxes where you could check if you wanted to be in the kitchen or in the garden or in the publications building. And I put my own little box and I said, in the Ghandharvas. And I was told, no, it doesn't really work that way. You need to be at Ananda for a year before you sing in the Ghandharvas. And I was crushed, but no, I'm exaggerating. But I had enough other things to keep me on the learning curve, and taking the yoga teacher training and starting to work at Earth Song. But lo and behold, about 6 months after I moved to Ananda, they needed someone in the Ghandharvas. And the reason why is that Swamiji formed for the first time the Ananda Singers. And so 5 of the singers, the 2 best guitarists and 3 other singers, were forming a group to make a recording and to start touring. And so we now had the Ghandharvas as being kind of like the home group. And I was invited to sing as a soprano. Now, in my singing career, I'm a mezzo-soprano, and I love singing the alto and the tenor parts because they're harmony. I love singing harmony. In high school, I sang tenor because there were only 2 tenors in the tenor section, and so another girl and I learned the tenor parts. And I've sung in barbershop quartets where I'm the high tenor. So I enjoy singing, the lower parts. But I thought, this is my only way, I'm going to do it. And sure enough, I could sing the music. And I do feel like this was, a great blessing. I became unafraid to try and reach the high notes. And I could sing somewhat high, but I'm not a true soprano. And singing really high is a stretch. Now, those early songs of Swamiji's were not written in a very high range. As we got into the Oratorio, that changed, and some of the Oratorio songs are quite high for the sopranos, the tenors, and the basses. But we've all jumped in and done our best to learn the music and be inspirations for it, and to feel the inspiration. And that is the big difference, is it really transforms you from the inside out. As you're singing the music and you're focusing on what you're singing, and you're trying to get out of the way and be a channel and have Master's light come through your eyes, and have your chakras be open, and blend with everyone else and hit the right note, and follow the directions of you know, crescendo or getting softer, all of these things. When you get out of the way and the music is just flowing through you, it transforms you in a way unlike anything else, I venture to say, except for Kriya. And I think that music is like a very, very powerful part of our path. And at one point, Swamiji, I think more than once, encouraged everyone to sing in the choir. And so most everyone was singing in the choir, and that was wonderful for them. And so another thing that I've seen is people don't think they can sing, or they don't think they're musical, and then they start to chant, and then they start to sing, and they're off on the most beautiful journey of their lifetime, being able to express the divine through this music. Music at Ananda is another area where we find that, well, if there's not a choir and I can sing or play guitar, then I guess we should start doing something. And that happened for me first when we moved to the Atherton House in, I guess it was late '83. And there was no choir. At that point, we were having the Sunday services in the Menlo Park bookstore in East West Books. We'd move the chairs out, we'd move the shelves out and bring chairs from the cellar. And so there were 4 of us, and I played guitar and sang tenor because there was only one man singing bass and then 2 other women, and it was great. It was fun. And so that was the beginning of many, many small groups or larger groups that I've directed or, you know, tried to help spearhead. And in 2011, I went to India, and I was asked to stay and help with the choir there, and also to start a small group there. So we had a group, a 4-person group. We had a British woman singing alto. I was singing soprano, playing guitar. We had an Indian man, Shurjo, singing tenor, and we had Bara, who's from Uruguay via Canada with Italian descent, living in India, now married to an Indian woman, and he was singing bass, and he's now the director of the music in India. So the 4 of us, every week, Swamiji would say, "Can you sing this song?" So we would be scrambling to learn a new song, and for them, mostly, they hadn't sung a lot of this music, and also learning some of it. Learning music can be challenging for some people. So it was very intensive, and some of the songs did not come out that well. Memories was one that I remember we struggled with a little bit, but you know, we just accept the challenge. And he gave satsangs every week, and so he'd ask us to sing 1 or 2 songs. A small group would sing 1 song, and the choir would sing 1 or 2 songs. And so one time Swamiji was giving a talk for a group of educators in Pune, and he wanted us to sing Philosopher and the Boatman. And so we divvied up the parts, and we determined that Bara would be the philosopher. And Bara's got a Spanish accent, speaking English in India, and in the way Swamiji has taught us to sing this song, the philosopher has kind of a British accent. And so I was coaching Bara and trying to imitate how to do this, and he couldn't quite get it. And but we were having fun with it, and we thought, well, we'll just do our best. And then we get the word that Swamiji would like to hear us sing it. He wanted us to come and see how it was going. Poor Bara was really nervous. So we went up there, and sure enough, Swamiji stopped him right away and told him all the things that I had been telling him. And Bara tried, but Swamiji just said, maybe I should just do it. And I think I actually said, Swami, maybe you should do it. And he said, maybe I should. And so he did. And we actually have video, it's poor quality, of that, Swamiji singing Philosopher and the Boatman for, and our small group singing it in India. And it's a treasure. It's so sweet. It's probably the last time that he sang that song. And in his later years, his voice wasn't as robust and strong as it used to be, but the sweetness and the vibration and the feeling was so present, and it always brought tears to my eyes and heart to hear Swamiji singing. I'm going to talk about the Festival of Light and my memories of when Swamiji first wrote it and introduced it to the community. I was living in the Atherton house in Palo Alto area with my family, and in 1984 and 1985, and we got the call to come to San Francisco because Swamiji had just arrived. I believe he had just arrived from Italy. And so Agni and I were being shown the songs, and in particular the Thunder of Om was a very different, rousing song / chant that he wrote for the festival. And he liked the double strum, but he was concerned that the tempo would get away from people, that it would get to be kind of too much like galloping horses. And so with the Festival of Light, there's been a real variety of how people have played it. And I travel around the world, so I hear it played everywhere from, India to Italy, and in the US in different places also. So my understanding is that he wanted it to be fairly quick, but not out of control quick, but with energy and power. And if it's done too slowly, it kind of loses that, and that's what sometimes happens. So the strum is important, and the energy and the feeling of it, the speed, and that's my memory of the Thunder of Om. And then we have the two festival songs, the two oratorio songs, You Remain Our Friend and Thy Light Within Us Shining. And Swamiji was very specific that he did not want those to be sung too slowly. He said it felt like a funeral dirge if they were done too slowly. So they are normally sung, or should be sung, a little faster than when we perform them in the oratorio. And with Father Mother, when I was living in India and doing the music over there, he said that he wanted it to be faster. And I think there's a tendency again to have that be kind of a slower chant, but he said it's an arati and it's very joyful, and so it should have, again, a little more energy and speed behind it. Whereas Om Christ Amen is very slow. In fact, if it seems to speed up on its own, so it's good to start that slowly, I think, and then it tends to speed up, as I said. And then we have Sing Out with Joy, and again, not too fast, not too slow. It's kind of like the Thunder of Om. It has a beautiful lilting, joyful energy to it, as is the case with pretty much all of Swamiji's music that I can think of. The words really help you understand the tempo and the vibration of the song, and that's the beauty of his music. It's really touches the soul on many levels. There's one other thing I want to say about the festival music is when he first wrote it, he had When Human Hopes also included in the festival music, and that was to be sung at the offertory. So in subsequent years, just substituted other songs for that. Now, after Swamiji introduced the festival to us in the community, now mind you, we didn't really have a lot of other communities. We had the San Francisco mansion, and we had the house in Atherton, And we were just beginning in Italy. I don't really know the time frames for the other communities in the U.S., but at the village, we started doing it every weeknight at the chapel. And so that means the festival was being done 6 days a week, just here at the village. And so I was scheduling the guitarists at the time. I think we had about 12 guitarists, which was a good thing because we all had a shift, at least one shift playing during the week at the chapel, and then on Sunday as well. And I believe that Swamiji did this to spiritualize the festival. And I think at the beginning, for me anyway, I had a little resistance to all the standing up, sitting down, the ceremonial part. I have come from a Quaker background, which is no frills. You sit in silent meditation. There's not even a minister or preacher. And so for me, it was like a little, it was different. And but going to do it once or twice a week for, you know, that initial period of time, it quickly got past any resistance that I had, and I just learned to go so deep with it. And I think that's, you know, the beauty of when Swamiji, in a sense, spiritualized it, the way Master spiritualized cosmic chants, and also the way Swamiji spiritualized, or we all spiritualized, the Oratorio when we first took it to the Holy Land. But that's another story. During this year of having the festival at the chapel every weeknight, it wasn't always a crowded chapel, as you can imagine. I mean, at the time, the community, there may have been, you know, 150, 200 people living here. And sometimes it was the minister and the guitarist. And other times, you know, there were quite a handful of people there. But it made us have to go deep into it, into the power of it, and with our hearts, minds, and souls, and the music and the words and, you know, the prayers, all of those make the festival such a powerful experience. And if you don't focus and you're just kind of absent-minded, then yeah, it can be kind of, you know, boring. But when you do, and when you're a musician or a minister, obviously you have to be that focus and channel. So I'm very grateful for that time, and I think that the festival was spiritualized during that time. I explain Ananda music to newcomers as kind of being like a tree with two branches. And the one branch you have the chanting and the, you know, the songs that are specific for helping us to go into meditation. And in the other branch you have the songs that are the choir songs, and they're more specific for performance. And with the Oratorio and also with the festival, you have this mix that they're both, some of them are both songs and chants. And so, for instance, when you're performing the Oratorio, some of the songs are just so deep you want to close your eyes and take them inward as you would a chant, but you can't because you're performing. So it's a very interesting style of performing because as the singers and the musicians, we're actively trying to be channels of a particular light and joy and inspiration. And both the Oratorio and the festival are such wonderful vehicles for that. Well, the history of the Oratorio is in, I believe it was about 1983. Actually, I'm going to preface that with the history of bringing guitar into the chanting, because this is it's connected. Swamiji had met a group of devotees in Italy, and he invited some of them to come one winter to visit us at Ananda. I believe it was 1983. So Rosanna and her 3 cousins all came for a few months, and they played their chants with very dynamic guitar, and Swamiji loved that. It added rhythm and energy, and it was a great compliment to the oratorio, to the harmonium. And so you see that was also incorporated into the Festival of Light. And so that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship with the Peki group, and Swamiji the following year went to the Holy Land with Rosanna on pilgrimage as divine friendship. And they meditated in all of the different places of Jesus' life. And when he came back, in about a month's time, he just channeled all of this music and the words for the oratorio. Most of it was at that time. And I may have the dates a little off. It might be I've been a year earlier for both of those things. In August of 1985, Swamiji and Rosanna were married at the Crystal Hermitage, and afterwards they went on honeymoon to India and then joined a group of pilgrims to the Holy Land. And I was on that pilgrimage, very, very blessed to have been able to go on that. And what we did is we sang all of the oratorio songs in all of the places where they were birthed. And Swamiji and Rosanna joined us, as I mentioned, in the Holy Land and were on the bus with us, and it was just a joyful pilgrimage. We'd go to a particular site and we'd all sing the song that Swamiji had been inspired to channel for that particular site. And then we'd meditate. And in this way, we sang these songs over and over again, and this is the first time they had been sung in the Holy Land. And so it felt to me that they were being spiritualized. Just as Master spiritualized cosmic chants, I believe that that group spiritualized the oratorio songs in the Holy Land. And when we came back, we continued to perform the oratorio periodically during the year down in the Bay Area. And I remember one time we were about to do it in Palo Alto, and Swamiji had, by this time, he had actually written the recitatives. Before that time, he had the instrumentals, and he had the some solos, and he had the choir songs, and he had narration in between most of the pieces of music. But at a certain point, a few years after he first wrote the oratorio, he was inspired to write little introductions to each of the solos and each of the songs, and those are the recitatives, and they're short, kind of narrative songs. And so we were doing that for the very first time. And so we had the 4 soloists, and I was one of the soloists. And we were literally in our costumes, I call them the costumes, our outfits. And someone came running in with a piece of paper hot off the Xerox machine, or the fax machine, it must have been. And because this would have been in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, I can't quite remember, and said, "Oh, here's a tenor solo for Lakshman." Lakshman Simpson was the tenor soloist at the time, and being a brilliant musician, he learned it very quickly. But we were literally about to start the oratorio when that happened. So that's a fun story of that. In the beginning, we did the oratorio, I think usually at Easter, and there were times we had a slideshow kind of behind it, and we dressed in white tops and black skirts, and the women all felt like we were waitresses. And it was, sometimes if it was a Christmas oratorio, it'd have a colorful flower, and same with Easter with those colors. We did it in the Bay Area, and down in LA and of course in the Holy Land. And then 2000, I believe, we did a tour of the Oratorio in Italy, and that was just wonderful. Swamiji was with us, and we did 2 weeks throughout Italy in the big cities, in these cathedrals that were just beautiful sound acoustics. And I remember one story, we were in Florence, and afterwards a man came up to Swamiji, and he, of course all the songs were sung in English at that time. Since then, there are translations for many into Italian for many of the Oratorio songs and many of the other songs as well. But at this time, we sang everything in English. And this man came up to Swamiji and said, I don't understand a word of what you all were singing, but I understand every word of what you were singing. And I think he might have even been French and in Italy. But that is not an exact quote perhaps, but the idea that you don't need to understand the words because the vibration is so strong. And as singers and musicians, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get out of the way so we can let this pure vibration flow through us. And there have been many suggestions from Swamiji and other brilliant choir directors over the years. And I'll just offer a few right now since we're talking about this, is focusing on the director's spiritual eye. That's very powerful. You don't look at their heads or their eyes or their hands. I mean, you see that peripherally, but you're seeing them in the spiritual eye. And of course, trying to be singing from the spiritual eye and opening your throat chakra and singing from your heart chakra all at the same time. And I feel when I'm singing, especially when there's an altar of the masters behind us, I just feel like they're there. They're just singing through me, and the more I can get out of the way, the more transforming of an experience it is for me. And I have to say, 1985. So how many years ago is that? Many years ago, when I first went on this pilgrimage to the Holy Land, every oratorio, and it's easily 100, if not hundreds, I can't remember. Some years we would do them 6, 7, 8 times. I feel that I'm transported right back to those shrines, and sometimes I'm so uplifted that I'm wondering if I'm standing on my feet. And the Oratorio is one of the most profound musical experiences that I've had in all of my life, and I've been doing music since I was a young child. So it's a great blessing, and Swamiji's, I don't know, great. He has so many gifts to the world, but musically this is certainly one of them.